Isn't there like a duck or something like that?
Oh my god, a duck?
Or a turtle? A turtle duck.
A turtle duck?
Turtle duck, I got it.
A tuck?
Platypus bears.
Most of the time we were playing, I was like, I don't really even know what the hell I'm doing with it. If you like put on some basic rags and stuff, then you wind up with another problem. You have the rags on, you have your new tools that you brought out, and you get to your corpse. Oh, you're overloaded in your inventory, because it's the stuff that was in your inventory then, and now the stuff that's in your inventory now, and it doesn't always parse together. Hey Alex, did you know that our show just turned 40?
Did it turn 40?
Yeah.
40 days, 40 nights. 40 just like your age.
40 just like my age. And
happy late birthday, Nathan.
Thank you. And happy birthday to our 40th episode on Total Pebble Knockdown. And hi, welcome to the show. My name is Nathan.
And I, as 40 times before, am Alex.
There you go.
I guess 39 times before.
39. Now 40 times.
Now 40. For the 40th time.
Once we're done with this episode, you can say for the 40th time. So, we're going to start off the show with a delving deeper, and actually, Alex has our topic of conversation for what we're delving into. So, what's going on?
It was something... So, I know I haven't really explained what I mean by living in fantasy worlds to you. I want to paint this picture for you, Nathan. Nathan, you're in a D&D game right now, right?
Yes, I am.
Not right this second. But you and I, you're in one of my games.
Yes.
I know I didn't really make this world. It's Forgotten Realms. It's Icespire Peak. But you're familiar with how the world works. And you're kind of familiar with like fantasy worlds, fantasy settings, Lord of the Rings, that type of stuff.
Yes.
So, if I were to say, Nathan, beside you, or your character, I guess in this instance, said, Max, when you look beside you, you see a spider.
Yes.
Okay? You assume that when I say a spider, you see an 8-legged creature, probably small, unless I say it's a very large or dire spider or something big. I assume your basis for that spider is based on the real world.
If I had no previous knowledge of the world itself, I would probably make that assumption.
Okay, so if I give you another example, like if I say Nathan, Max, roll perception, you make your perception, and I'm like, so I describe a scene. You see a dragonfly landing on a flower.
Okay.
I don't know if dragonflies like flowers, to be fair.
They might like the bugs on the flowers.
Maybe, yeah, they do eat bugs.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, a dragonfly, and you picture a dragonfly based on our real world, I assume.
Yes.
Because I've given you something that is relevant to our real world in your game to make it relatable.
Right.
What if I then said, as you're looking at this dragonfly, it turns and looks at you.
Okay.
And then blinks.
That would be a little bit jarring, I suppose.
Yeah, it would be a little jarring, wouldn't it? Or if the spider blinked at you and 8 eyes all independently just blinked.
Oh yeah, and it was trying to give me a Morse code message. That would be
just Morse code and blinking.
Morse code is spider blinking.
So I was thinking about this.
Okay.
When I proposed the idea, and I was talking to Ray about it. And the fact that fantasy and, science fiction worlds or science fantasy worlds in the case of RPGs and the like, draw upon stuff that we generally are familiar-ish with in a lot of cases, or we base them on things that we are recognizing.
Yes.
But they are fantasy, they are not real, and they can do anything they want.
Sure.
So I think it's really interesting to give your players a world which is relatable, they can easily understand it. But then I think it's really fun if you can give them something really obscure or different or maybe uncanny, depending on what vibe you want to go with.
Sure.
But like in this case, the dragonfly looks at you and blinks, eyelids closing over the eyes. probably a little disturbing and jarring because
Yes.
dragonflies don't have eyelids; they don't blink.
Right. Right.
That would be a little weird.
Yes, it sure would.
I was thinking about that as just like a concept because I enjoy making worlds that are living and feel different, but I don't, if it's not a world I've created, I don't really have the chance to do that. For instance, the last game I ran in a world that I created, I had, I think, 3 moons in the sky, and I had described the sky as like a deep azure blue.
Okay.
Which is a much more rich blue than our sky typically is.
Yeah.
It's,
certainly
more like a sapphire in color.
Yeah, very nice, very nice.
So it's really fun to think about the many different ways fantasy worlds could actually be just played with to make it a unique experience, to make your players kind of wonder. And I was wondering if you had thoughts about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think I see where you're going with this. So, we assume, like, people really will only be able to work with the outside of the knowledge of another world, the world that we actually currently inhabit. So the rule sets that you have set down are usually going to be based presumptively on what you can see and observe here on Earth in the actual realm of existence. What you're talking about is the moment that you introduce like a surrealist concept into that.
Right.
That then changes and modifies.
Like when you're playing in the Forgotten Realms, you're not playing on Earth.
No. You're
playing on Albier Toril.
Right.
When the Forgotten Realms is based in there, and then like Sword Coast and Faerun is like a continent. There are many other continents on Albier Toril.
Sure.
But it's still not Earth. It's an Earth analog.
Sure. It's
familiar as an Earth-like setting.
Yeah.
But then if you go even like Star Wars, Tatooine.
Yeah.
It's still an analog of an Earth-like planet. It is just a desert planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's also the 2 suns. So it's a binary system. That alone is something that, if you were to go and describe a scene to your players that go out of town and you go, it's really hot. The twin suns are blazing and you can feel the oppressive heat. Suddenly your players go, oh, there's 2 suns in the sky.
Right. I do kind of wonder, like, especially with science fiction and fantasy, I think does something like this. In sci-fi, I always feel like the way that they kind of create surrealist attitudes is like, let's add a number to it. Like, instead of 1 sun, we'll just have 2. Instead of 1 moon, 5 moons. Instead of, instead of the creature having 2 arms, it has 17 arms.
Sure. I mean, on the sun's part, technically most stars in the universe seem to be binaries.
Yeah.
So that would be more normal. Again, from the example of my world before, I also had rings on the planet that you could see sometimes. Because it had its own ring system, which again adds a little bit of sci-fi to it because it seems just like a sci-fi type thing, although it's just a thing that could be part of that world.
Yeah.
Or maybe in a more magic setting, you could have the floating land masses that appear.
Oh, sure. All of a sudden I have Columbia. I'm going to explore a floating city in the sky.
Sure.
In fantasy realms, I feel like they usually just make things larger. There's a lot of animals and things that they're like, or we could make it bigger. Like, that's where we get dire animals from,
dire
or giant,
mega, legendary animals.
Yeah, giant rats. It's not just a rat; it's a giant rat. That's what makes
rat of unusual size.
That's right. It's not just a big squid. It's a kraken now, and it's the size of skyscraper. You enjoy. It's not just a spider. These are giant spiders. They're giant snakes. They're giant this. They're giant that. Which is on the concept of, these small creatures. What if they were giant and you had to fight them with swords?
Yeah. What if you see a dragonfly and it happens to just be farther away, and then it gets closer and it's 20 feet long?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a lot of ways, this is like, even in Fallout, there's a lot of, creatures like Cazadors. Cazadors are actually based on the, the tarantula hawk wasp, which is a real thing, but it's usually like, a couple inches long and not like 5 feet big, 3 feet big. And you realize when they like blow it up and mutate it, it becomes a real threat to you. And
I mean, even the
Deathclaw
in Fallout is based upon like some kind of lizard.
Yeah. I think Deathclaws were always supposed to be like Fallout's version of dragons, just no
Probably.
wings or anything like that.
Well, until you get to Fallout 76, then you got a dragon.
Then you have you have those bats. I don't know
whatever they were. I don't know.
Yeah, the giant bats that summon.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that and thought it'd be interesting to kind of mull over and see what you thought about that, and then to pose a question to our listeners. What are some ways you like to, give flavor to a world where it's not just another Earth analog in place of a different setting, or even just it is the Earth, like a modern setting Earth, but what are some things you do or would like to do or would like to see, for things to make it feel alive, feel different than just our day-to-day hubbub? Aside from magic being prevalent in these monsters in a lot of cases, or really high-tech stuff we don't have, why would you not add things to make it feel different? If you're going to add magic, then there can be lots of different things that go on as well to make the world a very different feeling place than just where we live with magic.
Yeah, in that, what I was just thinking about too is in settings that are supposed to be like fictional settings, but they use Earth as your starting point. So things like, I believe Shadowrun does this, 1879 and Earth Dawn, Honor from Dom, all of those build themselves off of Earth as itself, and then expand out with supernatural elements. There's actually quite a few fictional worlds that actually use Earth as the starting point. I think even like Wheel of Time and Shannara Chronicles, even though they're fantasy settings, were fantasy settings well after the end of Earth, set on Earth. So you can think about it like, okay, well, we had the rule set, but then there were other things that came into that. So in some ways, you've already created a world that people can wrap their heads around, but you've added to it and accentuated it. So you can even do that with realms that are not completely divorced from Earth as you know it. And I think it actually helps with, people that are not familiar with those kinds of settings. But, with things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and all of those, I think we've also become pretty used to the fact that if I'm dealing with a setting on another planet or something like that, there's probably going to be elements that I'm not familiar with. It's just about that moment where you actually introduce what the difference is to that world and how you introduce it. Yeah.
I think it's definitely fun to have a little bit of difference to give the world some extra oomph.
Yeah, you want to give it some extra oomph. What do you prefer to do to actually introduce that? Like the idea of the blinking spider is fun. But like if we were to kind of start or introduce players with just the basics of like this is the planet, and this is, like, stuff that you would recognize. These are, like, how cities looked in a certain time period or whatever.
Well, I guess the thing to remember is that the players' characters are probably going to be familiar with the world itself if they've lived there, unless they're brand new to that planet or that realm or wherever they're, like, if they suddenly are transported there or appear there, then everything is new to them. So you can kind of just play it as if they should already know it. Just be like, yes, as you walk outside of the sky, as you walk outside of the inn to start your adventure, the deep green sky, is alive with the hums of crabs.
Always crabs.
And the shadow of, like, the 4 moons are casting something, I'm not good on the spot, Nathan.
Yeah,
but
that's fine. Anyway,
the twin suns blaze ahead of you. The like twin green stars in the green sky.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's green. Everything's green. Everything's turning up green.
Yeah. What's up with all that green?
Oh, fog.
One of the things that you can do, it would be interesting to do a campaign like this, though, where you set it up similar to, like, Fallout 4, where it's like, okay, well, the world seems to be ending, and then you're the man at a time, or woman at a time, and you get frozen, and then you awake to a world that's completely different than the last time you were there.
I mean, you could do that, too, or go time travel is something I enjoy in games, so.
Yeah. I think that it'd be interesting if you were trying to do that in the realm of something like a D&D, like, so do you not have character classes before you go in, or do you end up with them afterward? Did you start out as like a spellcaster before spellcasting was even around, and then it introduced itself later, or do you find that you have latent powers afterward?
Who knows?
Yeah, because sometimes your characters might actually be the supernatural elements, as a lot of times they have to be. If you're the big damn hero, chances are you have some inherent power that's above and beyond what the common man has in that. But yeah, I guess the point that we'd be making here is that if you have a world, you can kind of start off with a lot of elements that are very familiar to people, but then you can start introducing things that don't seem quite right. And I'd be interested to see what people would suggest for ways that you can implement that.
I think an example of a world that has this exact thing is probably like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or the Avatar universe in general.
Oh, sure.
Where they've got animals that are kind of like hybrids of different animals, a lot of cases.
Oh, sure.
Isn't there like a duck or something like that?
Oh my god, a duck?
Or a turtle? A turtle duck.
A turtle duck?
Turtle duck, I got it.
A tuck?
Platypus bears.
Platypus bears.
Yep, there you go.
Oh.
Or you can edit part of that out really quick for the podcast.
Bearpuss.
Yeah, platybear.
Platybear. Perfect.
Bearpuss.
I got a platybear trophy. But
yeah, like that introduces those creatures that are, familiar, but also a twist on them. So it's like, oh, weird.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good thought process to go through about what we would consider to be like the supernatural elements to actually engage people with the world. And yeah, I would be interested to all of you that are listening, if you happen to have some examples of things that you've implemented in your games to kind of bring those new elements in to flesh out the world, please let us know, and you can find us over on our Discord for that. That'd be great. Alex, we have a Discord discussions for the first time in a while.
Yes, because there's been discussion in the Discord.
There has been a suggested segment from Datum, actually, and I'll read what he said. What's your favorite character creation experience in A, tabletop role-playing, and B, video games? What's your least favorite for both? Why? All of the above. That's like 5 questions.
It's at least 2 questions.
It's at least 2. So I think what Datum's kind of getting at is that at the beginning of any kind of an RPG experience, you're going to have to build your character out. When you do that, there are ones that are better at creating that experience than others.
There are.
Yeah. I think let's start with some of the basics, though. Do you prefer having a system where they leave you as sort of a blank slate and then introduce a bunch of stuff, or do you want to really build out how you're going to develop your character at the beginning?
I feel like that depends on the type of game I'm playing.
Okay, fair.
Tabletop role-playing game, I like to build a character up front.
Yeah.
Video games, that one really depends, but depending on the game, I like both, honestly. Like, I enjoy the Skyrim kind of thing, where it's like, here's a bit of a tutorial, here's some different things, some weapons to use, yes, now level and kind of create your character as you go. that's fine. I enjoy that.
Right.
Right. Or like Fallout, where it's pick your special stats, and then it's like, all right, well, I guess I'm playing this way since I did that.
Sure.
But I also like building out, like picking a class and then building your character like with that too.
Sure. I appreciate systems that will basically leave you as a blank slate and then kind of let you develop your character as you are going through a system. It's not something you can do with every game.
No.
You can't do it. But, like, recently I was playing some different Diablo-style games, and, apart from Diablo where you actually pick a character class, there are ones, Grim Dawn and Titan Quest both do this, where they they don't give you a class at the beginning. They don't give you anything, really, at the beginning. You have basic stats, and then you go in. And then after, like, level 2 or 3, they start introducing that you can have specialties or expertise classes and something like that. And then you can kind of determine what you want to do past that and what you want to put your stats into. Diablo will actually require you to choose one of several different classes. And maybe there is a class system. Knights of the Old Republic did that too, and then they went from having the one class that you pick at the beginning where you're either a scoundrel or a soldier or a scout, and then they have you do like Jedi classes after you get to that point in the story too, later in the game. So there are those sort of things. And you're right, it does depend on the gaming experience that you're looking for. I would say more than just the aspects of designing your character, because sometimes I think they get way too into the weeds on that, is how they actually introduce it and make it make sense for your character. Like, for instance, in, Mass Effect 2. In Mass Effect 2, they start you off not really knowing if you've played the previous game or anything. But they start you off on, like, the Normandy 1, and it's the ship's blowing up, and you get, like, jettisoned off into space.
Perfect.
And you're basically dead. You're whatever happened to you, it like, practically destroyed you. And then Cerberus comes in and pretty much rebuilds you from the ground up. So at that point, they're like saying like, okay, so what do you look like now that we've rebuilt you? Essentially, do you look like you did before, or do you look like something else? And that's how they justify you actually having a character model, your design, what you look like, and essentially what you do in the game, what your shepherd is going to look like.
Right.
They do something similar to that in Fallout New Vegas, where you basically, after you get shot in the head, spoiler for the first 5 seconds of the game, but after you get shot in the head and Doc Mitchell, like, says, yeah, I patched you up, they put a mirror up to you. You know, he puts up a mirror and says, yeah, how'd I do? And that's actually where the character creation screen comes in, and you have to design what you look like, and then to determine, like, who you are, they go over to the Vitamatic, like you said, and you pick your stats, and they tell you what it's like, and then they do their little ink blot test to get an idea of your personality, and then after you do all of that, you've essentially created your character. And so I like the fact that they actually themed it around something, more than just the actual character creation process. I've seen some that I didn't like so much that were just like, hey, here's what your hair is gonna look like. You like that? Here's what here's your stats. You like these stats? I mean, for as much as I like Cyberpunk, they don't do a ton really at the front to kind of, give you that. They start you off with a backstory and say like, hey, what do you want to specialize in? And it's like, I don't really know. What do they do?
Yeah, but they leave you as a pretty blank slate aside from your backstory.
They do.
In Cyberpunk.
They do.
So that's giving your character a backstory for the story that makes sense.
Right.
But then letting you still have a blank slate to deal with.
Right, yeah. They sort of load you up, and I will say that, like, the way that they introduce the storylines for those I felt like it was going to have more impact than it really did on the story as a whole. Like when I was like, I'm going to be a nomad, and I'm going to be out there. And you realize that the real character creation isn't until later, where you start getting your stats in and determine how you want to play the game. It would have been good to explain that a little bit more, but it wasn't like egregious. Yeah, but do you have an example, while I'm thinking about this, of what your favorite kind of character creation was in a video game?
In a video game? Oh man. It's really tough. There's a lot of video games I like. For instance, the Kingdoms of Amalur character creation, well, fairly simple, is nice because it's like, oh yeah, you've come back from the dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, who were you?
Yes.
It's like, this is who I was. Then there's games like Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous and Pathfinder Kingmaker, which are like D&D style, because they're Pathfinder style, I guess, because it's Pathfinder. You know, full-on character creation. You know, make your level 1 character.
Yeah.
The issue I have with that is if you're not familiar with playing Pathfinder, you might not know what all of these classes and all of these things in it are, and it's not very well described to you and presented to you in a way that, if you're not familiar with Pathfinder, you might not understand a lot of these things.
Right. That's
like, I understand where Pathfinder took it, a lot of it from D&D 3.5, so I know that stuff. But even then, I was like, I don't know what this stat is.
Right.
I'm like, what is this? And some of the class things are just really confusing.
Yeah.
So I think, again, Skyrim has a really decent. I know it's not like a full-on character creator, but it's like, all right, pick your race and your look, and then you're a blank slate. Although then there's no backstory. Cyberpunk is decent. I like having a backstory and then making your character, making V who you want them to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, there's not a lot of freedom in some of it, but like you can build the character how you want.
Yeah, I think the only thing I was trying to get to there is that when you get to the actual like differentiating out where you're going to put your stats and everything, there's a long period of time where you'll be going through the different stat blocks like, what do I want to unlock? And so I'm realizing I'm sitting there. It would have just been handy to kind of go over a brief idea about like how each one of those stat blocks plays in. And that's not necessarily a problem with just Cyberpunk. It's a problem with a lot of games where they're like, here's giant skill trees, figure it out, sucker. And like, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, but like, I'd really like a better idea of like, if I want to play in a certain way, are these like stealthy skills? Are these like, you know, assault skills? Are these control skills? Like, what am I looking at without having to go through the entire skill tree to figure out what the end goal is? Even Borderlands has this problem, really.
Yeah. I think there is a big difference between tabletop and video game when it comes to character creation.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot more freedom typically in tabletop than there is in video games, and a lot of video games require the character has a purpose or a reason or is a part of the story and a specific character. Like Borderlands, as you just gave an example, you don't play a class, you play a character.
Yeah.
And as much as I have a love-hate relationship with Borderlands, it's like it can be fun, but it's also kind of boring also to me. Because like I would like to create my own character for that. Like when they did Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, I was like, cool, it'd be great to make my own character. You know, D&D style, like build your own character.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're gonna play another character with a name, with a personality of their own. And like, okay, it's actually, just an insert yourself.
I think that in Wonderlands, though, they actually will let you build your character. It's just that there are different classes that you can pick.
Sure, but are the classes just specific people? Or do you get to like
No,
customize that?
no, actually, I don't think they are.
Because I hadn't looked into that.
Okay.
But in the other ones, it's very much so.
Your specific characters in all of those, yeah. So you're either the Sirens or you're Brick or Mordecai, or you have named characters. No, actually, I think in Wonderlands, what they did to try and differentiate that is that like there's characters around the table that are playing, but then they have to make characters anyway, so you can actually customize like a bunch of stuff about what the character looks like.
Okay.
And then also something I gotta play it at some point because I'm very interested what they did with the system, is that they get you one of like 6 classes that you can pick, and then at a certain point you can multi-class and you can pick another one as well. So there's a lot of different varieties of options between the two that you can insert yourself into.
Gotcha.
Because I think that they were trying to replicate a little bit more the actual tabletop experience with your character creation. But yeah, you're right. In the actual Borderlands games, you're always playing a character. And I don't know, I think it works for that system just because you are a character inhabiting the world and it gets you into the action a lot faster. It's like, yep, I'm Nisha the Gunslinger. That's what I'm going to be. Okay, fine. That's good. And we're off to the races. But in a lot of games, yeah, you might want to actually create your character and do something a little bit more rich with that. You mentioned Kingdoms of Amalur. That's actually a really good example because that is one that leaves you as a blank slate at the beginning. Fable, also a good example of that. Actually, even Stardew Valley. They basically just like say at the beginning, like, you're always going to start the same way. This is always going to be the way that you start, probably for the first half hour or the hour of the game. Your character is going to look exactly the same as everybody else after you choose like your actual physical characteristics cosmetic part. And then you build out from that. And I do like those systems, just because if you're not familiar with the worlds themselves, you don't necessarily know how you want to interact with them. You might want to be like a caster, you might want to use magic, you might want to just smack things with a sword. And if you're not familiar with the world or how it works, you might want to wait to find out about that. The customization systems. So I would say that those are probably some of the better examples. Tabletop, I mean, I can't tell you that I've played enough systems to really give you examples of that. Like, I think D&D does a pretty decent, like, an engaging way of designing characters.
I think it's better now than it was.
5e is very streamlined by comparison to older versions. Like,
well, it's streamlined, but it also gives you like other things than just your characters, like what class they are and what skills they have to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you, your flaws, bonds, your ideals, and your, that stuff. And it makes you kind of build out the character and give them some purposes behind them, which is nice.
Sure.
I think for me personally, I've played more systems, I think, at this point, and some of them are really fun creation wise, but I think one of the ones I want to say I enjoyed the most is actually Fantasy Flight's Warhammer 40k RPGs. Despite the system being kind of crunchy as fuck, and mechanically a bit confusing at times, the character creation was really neat. And the systems they have are really neat. I believe the creation system in that was you don't really pick your race, you're all some kind of human, because you're Imperial, generally speaking, you're Imperial. So like in Rogue Trader, you'd go, all right, well, what class are you? You're the Rogue Trader. All right, so you start with let's see if I can find a chart really quick, actually. I'm going to send this to you.
Okay.
You can insert that in the episode later if you want. But
beautiful. Let me look at it.
It gives you an origin path. So the first thing you pick is your home world.
Okay.
And so it gives you options of like a Death World or Frontier World, Voidborn or Footfallen, Forge World or Fortress Worlds, Hive World, Battlefleet, Imperial World, Penal World, Nobleborn, or Child of Destiny. And you go from there, and I think the way you do it is you're supposed to pick either the one directly below or to the sides of the one below your homeworld, for instance. So you go from here, down one or over two, and then you keep doing that for your entire thing to like create your character in a kind of interesting like pattern, right?
Got it.
So you pick this, and then you can be one of three, and you pick that, and you pick one of three, and you pick that and one of three. So you don't just pick one and then one. You don't just pick willy-nilly. It gives you like connected things, which is interesting.
Yeah.
In each of these different parts, your homeworld birthright, lure to the void, trials and travails, apparently, motivation, your career, and then your lineage, all give you different bonuses and stuff.
Got it.
So you could create two of the same class that have very different origin stories, for instance.
Right.
So you go homeworld, and it's like, all right, for instance, I was born on the Forge world, okay? And so then my birthright, I could go down one, and I could be like, and you check out which of these sound good to you, either mechanically or lore-wise. There's like lore in these reasons, in these different origins. I could be like, cool, I was born on the Forge world, I am in service to the throne. And then I would be like, all right, lure to the void. Maybe I'm duty bound. And then I would go down again and again. So I'm going to do this really quick to see what class I would be.
Yeah.
So duty bound, and then my trials and without knowing what all these would do. And I could say, maybe my trials and trivials was Lost Worlds. And then my motivation is for devotion.
Certainly.
Okay? Yeah, so from devotion, I would pick either an explorer, a missionary, or essential. So that choice gives you 3 different classes to choose.
Okay.
Which are your careers. So I really enjoyed that character creation because you start with like where you were born, and then you pick different paths that lead you to your class, your career.
I see. Yeah.
And I think that one's just really interesting to build out.
Yeah. Well, the step-by-step process seems to work out better because you're kind of getting deeper and deeper down the structure. There's actually a framework from design purposes that this equates to. Back when I was a journalist, it was the information pyramid. Yeah. Is where you start with just a very simple thing, and then you flesh out over the course of the next paragraphs, like more information about that, and then you go into further detail as you go down. But you have to be able to kind of encapsulate something pretty, soon in, and then really expand upon it as the article goes down. That's sort of this system that you're looking at. In similar fashion, like the only other systems, because I haven't played a ton of RPG systems, that I've played were like Open Legend and then like 1879. Open Legend is one of those systems that pretty much just gives you a sheet and lets you just kind of go wild. You basically like, hey, what's your character? And you have to kind of have a character design, but you can create anything you want. And then goes through an entire list of what would make sense for you. And these are where you have your, different kinds of resistances, and this is where you have your basic stats, etc., and what you're rolling on it. 1879 is a much crunchier system, and I would say that even though I like playing Dr. McFly and weird scientists are interesting, and the setting is super cool, the system that FASA made, if you were new to RPGs, or even if you were familiar with them, and you just got a hold of the character creation sheets on those, you'd be instantly lost. It's very, very I'll have to give you an example at some point, but if you see the character creation sheets, it's tabs upon it's sheets upon sheets of, these are your basic stats, here's a whole thing about your skills, here's a whole thing about your, the life that you'd have to lose to be unconscious or then killed. There's a lot. Your adventure points, I should say, what your current aptitude level is, or if you become an apprentice or an acolyte or a novice, how you've rose those up. You get very, very lost very soon. And of course, I had to play one of the probably hardest to wrap your head around classes in the entire game.
Of course.
And so
that is what you do.
Yeah. And so most of the time we were playing, I was like, I don't really even know what the hell I'm doing with it. I know who my character is, but I really, it wasn't until many months in where I could kind of wrap my head around how my character functions in the system. And I think that they did that because it was a build out from Earth Dawn, and I think Earth Dawn uses a similar system, so if you're familiar with that, which is a system that's been around a very, very long time, but for people who were big fans of Earth Dawn, I think 1879 was like a no-brainer. Like, you just move right over, and it's just, you know, different kinds of character classes, but set in the same basic world, but in a time period that's different. And so, but from an outsider perspective, I was sitting there kind of like going, oh boy, I would really like this to be streamlined, or get a better idea of what my abilities do, what my skills do, anything like that. The nice thing about like a 5e, especially with like D&D Beyond, is that they kind of lead you through that, like, okay, what's your, like, race and your name, and, you know, now what's your backstory, okay, what do you want your stats to be, and they go through, like, several tabs, just kind of like, boom, 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 congratulations, you have your character. Easy.
Congrats.
Yeah, congrats, you win. Even the way that they do individual classes is very streamlined. You know, it's like, oh, you raised up a level. Well, here's what you get. It's very much in the same vein of like maybe a Diablo 3 in some ways. You know, it's like, yep, your class just raised up. Now you get the skill. Enjoy. You'll have some options later. Don't worry about it. But it's about how you want to play the character. So that is. So I don't know if I can really tell you, Datum, what exactly my favorite and least favorite of those systems are off the top of my head. It's a little tricky to give you one specific example. I guess in video game terms, it's probably New Vegas, just because I like how it was presented, but it didn't overstay its welcome. Like in 3, the first, like, hour or something of the game when you're in the vault is kind of your character creation system. And New Vegas, they streamlined it and also made it thematically work, while understanding what all the elements were, and trying to make it explicit that you know what it is. I would say my least favorite, in video game terms, I don't know, probably just a game I didn't like very much. I'm trying to think what it would have been that I didn't like. Oh god.
I'd probably say fucking Borderlands.
You say Borderlands?
As my least favorite, just because it's not real. There's not really. You're not creating a character. You're just picking a playstyle.
You're picking up a character that's been basically pre-made for you, and then going through skill trees, which is something else entirely. You know, it probably would be actually more of like a survival game. I'd say maybe like Conan or something like that. Sometimes those games don't have the best version of character creation. Speaking of, we'll be talking about survival games soon in this episode, but I've seen probably the worst versions of it in survival-based kind of like RPGs where they try to get into those aspects. I think because they're more interested in the mechanics of the world than the character building itself. And yeah, I think one of the hard things about telling you what the least favorite is that if it was my least favorite, I probably don't remember it.
Right.
I remember character creation experiences that were good because I enjoyed them. I typically would have to think really, really hard about ones that I did not like because I probably never returned to them. And unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. In terms of role-playing, simply because of my lack of the diversity in role-playing games that I have, which, yeah, I still definitely want to expand that. There's a lot of systems I'd like to play. I'd say probably D&D actually has one of the best of the few that I've played. just because of how nicely streamlined it is, and the fact that I can wrap my head around like the functionality of all the classes, what I do, how it interacts with the world. I would say that the real crunchy systems that kind of just leave you to your own devices are the ones that I did not appreciate and would have preferred streamlined.
If I can convince you guys, maybe sometime I'll try to get the stuff for Dark Heresy. Oh,
interesting.
And it's one of the 40K RPGs from Fantasy Flight Games. But,
yeah.
It's one of the ones that I would actually really enjoy trying to run it.
Sure.
With people that aren't really familiar with 40K, because it kind of lends itself to that kind of actually being not a bad thing.
Sure.
Because in the case of Dark Heresy, or I think that's what I'm thinking, you'd be playing Inquisitorial Acolytes, as in like investigators.
Mm-hmm.
And generally in the 40K universe, Imperial citizens don't really know much about what actually goes on.
Right, yeah.
So having people that aren't familiar with the game universe, as well as some others, might be really interesting to do.
Yeah. The ones that I do hope to play eventually, would be like Pathfinder 2E, because I think that kind of lends itself. They tried to do kind of like 5E, but I'd be interested in the differences between them.
I'd be curious.
Yeah, because I know Pathfinder was kind of like 3.5, but when they did Pathfinder 2E, I think they tried to take it off more from 5. Shadowrun, because I like the concept, and something from World of Darkness, because I'm a little familiar with like Vampire the Masquerade, and the way that they do the point buy systems and all of that, and I'm like, I think that mechanically it's a very interesting system and a world.
Played both in my years. It's been a very long time.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I played like the video game of like Bloodlines, and I do have the ones for actually Pathfinder, and I have a Shadowrun in the video games that were like the CRPGs. So maybe I'll have to try those and see how the systems work in those, but I don't know how closely they go with the system. But so there you go. Why did we like the character creations? Why did we not like the character creations? I have to be able to wrap my head around it. It has to make thematic sense. I like character creations that basically will also kind of explain why I'm part of the world and kind of explain the world building almost through my character. I don't like ones that basically just give you a giant sheet and say fill in the blanks and we'll figure out the rest later. I guess that's kind of the thing. Maybe that's why I like being a blank slate up at the front, because you get more familiar with the world before you really have to make a lot of commitments to how you're playing. But anyway, it's an interesting question. I think I would toss it back to Discord and see if anybody has any other input about what you really like in systems and how you create your characters, because it is a very important part to RPGs. If you're not creating a character, I don't think you're playing an RPG. Maybe you are, Alex. Can you play an RPG where you don't create the character?
Yeah, Pokemon.
Fair enough. Pokemon had one of the best character creation systems. You just pick a Pokemon at the beginning, and you just.
I mean, you actually pick your avatar.
Yeah.
Older games is boy or just the one. The newer ones were a boy or a girl, and the newer ones are like, all right, pick your whatever.
Yeah.
Pick how you look, your hair, your eyes, if you're a boy, girl, or a neutral, and all of it. It's wonderful.
I will say that in terms of the actual building your character design, I have found myself less engaged with systems as they get more complex, just because it's like, I don't want to spend 30 minutes trying to figure out how far apart my eyebrows are.
That's why we're not ever going to play Fatal.
Finally on the show today, we have a games you didn't think we'd play. And Alex, I have a fun game for you, also in the survival genre. for you called Valheim. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with watching someone break it very badly.
I'll have to watch those videos because I'd be interested in trying to break it too. I would very much enjoy that.
I'll send it to you later.
Thank you very much, because before I jump back in, I'll be like, oh cool, I can break this game. Love it. I had a feeling that I'd probably play Valheim at some point, but it was on sale recently, and I picked it up because I had been itching to try it. Threw it in and started playing. I don't know what I really expected at the front. I kind of got the feeling that it was like a Norse mythology setting, and it was also like a survival game. And I've had a love-hate relationship with survival games in the past. Sometimes they become just egregiously annoying, and sometimes they become a lot of fun. I'm happy to say that actually Valheim is more fun than annoying.
Oh, that's good.
It's more fun than annoying. Not that there aren't annoyances in it, but that it's more fun than anything else. The way the game starts you off is, you pick your character and you can either create a world or join one. As you can even create community servers, I guess, and stuff like that. But you can build a world, and I think it's procedurally generated. I don't remember.
Don't remember.
I'll have to start another game and just see if I start in the same layout and everything. But I think that they generate it when you create a world.
Sure, it's like Minecraft.
Sort of like Minecraft, yeah. And in case it doesn't really show too, it is kind of pixel graphic. But the pixels are very, it's shaded cells almost that are, it's kind of hard to explain. But
I've seen it.
Yeah. Almost like, it looks a little bit more like a watercolor almost in the way that they framed everything in the game. Which is fine. It's not egregious. You have to look for it. I think that they did it to save on, space, and considering how large they were going to make the worlds, and that it was a very small team that actually built it. I think that it just made more logical sense to go that way. They start you off, and a little crow comes down, talks to you at these standing stones, and is basically like, "Yep, there's like these 5 avatars out there, and you have to track them down. You have to punch them in the face, and take their trophies and bring them back here, and you can unlock their powers and stuff like that." So you get a very basic idea up at the front of what your overarching goal is. But then they kind of say, well, but before you do that, we're going to have to get some things straightened out, and you probably want to learn how to use a workbench, and probably want to sit down in bed or something, build yourself a little house, and learn how to cook meat and hunt and do all of that stuff. And so over the course of, the next few hours, you end up learning how to, hunt and cook and chop down some trees and pick up a bunch of stuff off of the ground and all of that good stuff. And I did. I built myself a little camp. I had way too much wood. You can build bundles of wood, put them out and onto the side, and occasionally things will attack you. Boars are one of the first things you have to deal with, of course. They run at you, charge, and stuff like that. You find that there's different resources that you can grab from every enemy in the game, and those can be used in crafting recipes to expand what your workshop can do, etc., etc. So, pretty straightforward. And then, after you've, equipped yourself with some basic stuff, you might think to yourself, cool, I'm going out into the great unknown. And you wander on out into the great unknown, and you probably get yourself stomped. By something very, very large. Whether it be the little, greykin, the grey dwarves that are out there, some of them that hit pretty hard, or the big towering trolls, which I've encountered pretty quickly. They're these big blue guys that just come and try to, throw boulders at you.
Yeah, you just set them on fire, it's all good.
I had fire arrows, so it was...
Oh, good.
I took care of a couple of them. They are not easy, though. I even, and this is terrifying, this is the part where I was like, uh-oh, I'm scared now, is I built a raft after I got enough resources, and I kind of, hung around the coastline, but at a certain point, I drifted toward the ocean, that's, in the middle, And the second that I, like, started to get toward the ocean, out on the horizon, I saw the sea serpent, and it's, like, running all over the place, and I'm like, okay, just piloting back to shore as fast as I possibly can to get into the shallows, because, not taking on that thing. Not at all. Not with my raft. That ain't happening. I'm not prepared for the ocean. I'm gonna just end up in a ditch.
In a shark's belly.
In a shark's belly. Well, one of the first things I had to look at is, one, does this game have sharks? And apparently, no, it has sea serpent. It has sea serpent in ocean. Nothing really else. It's like, okay, good, I can deal with that. I can work with that. Then I saw the sea serpent, and I thought to myself, maybe not. But anyway, staying towards shore, and, getting your butt handed to you a few times to realize that, yes, skeletons are very dangerous and will usually attack you en masse. Yeah, they're annoying. That you'll come across a bunch of different structures, and sometimes these old decrepit castles just have a bunch of monsters in them that want to kill you quickly.
Good.
Also, shamans suck. Because one, they have acid spit that just poisons you, and then also, after you damage them, they just heal themselves with healing spells, and everything else around them, all the other Greykin. They're annoying.
Cool.
What I was able to do, though, luckily, was, I've gotten to the part where I took on the first, like, big, bad, the Mega Deer, as I'm gonna call it, Idar, I think. Was able to kill Idar, because bows are kind of the way to go in this game. Just snipe from afar as many times as you possibly.
I thought the method to kill them was campfires.
Oh, you can do it with campfires?
I'll show you that video later.
Thank you.
Let's game it out.
Yeah. I can see that working. Oh, if you just let them run over the campfires? If you put down a bunch of campfires?
Maybe you can clip it in here after you watch it, just a snippet of its video.
Okay. Just to explain, but...
Many campfires.
Yeah. It's not that it takes much resources to make them, so...
Yeah, endlessly spawning them on the ground hurts things a lot.
Yeah. Which is good, because I think that kind of gets me to the main pros and cons of the game. I think the pro is that it's pretty easy to get into, and it doesn't really waste a lot of time trying to, like, explain to you how the game works. It just kind of, like, gives you your tooltips and your explanation as you run across things. Like, after you've picked up resources that allow you to build something, the little crow comes down and tells you what you can do with that you've stumbled across this ancient cairn or whatever, or this is a dungeon area, and, make sure to bring a torch or whatever, It doesn't hold your hand too much, but enough that you don't get confused. The building aspects of it are, I think, more intuitive than some other ones that I've played. Conan's a good example of ones where it was a little tricky to they really didn't want you to put the roof where you wanted the roof to go. This one seems to want you to actually build something you like, so that's good. And it's not, the combat and everything is not too egregious that it gets annoying, so I did appreciate that too. The problems that I had were mostly that, like, every time I was going to run across an area where I might worry about dying, I pretty much had to make a new hut with a bed and a workshop and a campfire, and there was no, like, option to just do, like, a quick build of a camp that I could set down with the necessary resources. Because the way they design it is that, yeah, sure, you can throw a workbench down anywhere, but to actually make anything that you need to make, it has to be under shelter. So now I gotta put it under a shelter. If I make a bed, I have to put it under a shelter too. So now I got to build a roof, I got to build things, I got to get the resources in order to build all of that, and then you can't just bed down for the night. It also needs to be near a campfire, so I need to also build a campfire somewhere. So you spend a long time just building out these little huts, and maybe like a storage chest and stuff, so that I can actually, store a bunch of stuff so it doesn't get dropped on the ground if I die. And that's kind of because of one of my other big problems. Getting around is a chore. They do introduce later the ability to make, like, warp gates. You need some very specific resources, and they kind of come from later upgrades. More advanced woods that you can't chop down at the beginning. Certain gemstones that you don't have readily available at the time you start. Like, much later in the game. Many, 10 plus hours into the game, you might discover these resources. By that time, you've probably already taken a long time trekking all the way around the first areas. And if you die at any time, and you want to recover all the stuff that you had on your body...
Corpse running.
Yeah, you do the corpse run from whatever bed was the last spawn point that you saved at. Yeah, and I can tell you that running to those areas was the thing that I did not like about Diablo, and it's the thing that I do not like here.
Well, that's because you have to run naked to the corpse where you got killed. Yeah,
and even if you don't do that, if you, put on some basic rags and stuff, then you wind up with another problem. You have the rags on, you have your new tools that you brought out, and you get to your corpse, you're overloaded in your inventory, because it's the stuff that was in your inventory then, and now the stuff that's in your inventory now, and it doesn't always parse together. So, that's one of those things where I felt like streamlining would have been nice. Like, if there was just in the woods... One of the discoverable structures was that you could, activate quick portals or something so I could get around faster. That would be good. When I got the raft, I thought to myself, oh, this is cool. I can go across, inlets and stuff, and I can get, places. But the raft is real slow. The raft is not quick. It feels like they're taking you on the Jungle Cruise. Make sure that you see all of the stuff around, folks, while we're on our trip through the wilds. So they don't really leave you with a lot of ways to quickly traverse the environment. Horses would be nice. If you had horses, that would have been great. And I think that it was really built for the experience, not just to do as a single player. I think that they really liked the idea of doing a multiplayer experience, where you and a bunch of other people could actually work on, building something out, going on different adventures, going in different directions and harvesting resources and building it together. Because I think that as a single player experience, it just does become a little bit more of a slog and a chore to go anywhere and do anything. You have weight requirements, you have space requirements in your inventory. Those don't really get expanded out much. And you need a lot of tools too, to do different things. You need an axe in order to chop trees, but then it's not a good enough axe to chop other trees. You need a pick in order to, pick away at the thing. So, in similar fashion to a Stardew Valley, the first 10 slots that you have are all basic stuff that you need in order to do stuff in the game when you're going out into the world. And then after that, they give you a bunch of slots below, but you've already utilized a lot of what you have. And then your clothing takes on slots as well, and that has weight, and you have to manufacture it from skins that you might need from very dangerous enemies that if they kill you, then all of your cool equipment gets lost on the ground, and I gotta run back to it later. One of the things I tried, just to see if it would be possible, is that I was worried about stamina, especially when I go swimming, because if you end up losing your stamina while you're swimming, you can drown very quickly. I love that. So I thought to myself, well, what if I put down a workbench, and then I tried to manufacture a bridge to get over these streams and stuff. And what I found is that it takes an incredibly long time to even make a serviceable one. Because they don't just have, like, make a bridge as an option. I have to, like, use flooring and stairs and stuff to try and create a path over.
No, you can raise the terrain.
Oh, you can raise the terrain to some degree.
To a very, very high degree.
You can?
You'll see it in that video I'm going to give you.
Okay. Which I suppose would be very useful. I tried it to some luck, but not nearly as much as I was hoping. Maybe I didn't have enough stone. Maybe I had to have my Uber workshop or something. I don't know.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
It's all good.
But my workarounds were, piecemeal to try and make it happen. So I think it's, as far as my overall impression of it, was that as a survival game, it works better than a lot of them. I think the formula is very interesting. I think the Norse mythology as a framework is a cool idea. The biomes are very, very large. They're very explorable. It's a lot of open space in that. So you just kind of have to go with that. that you're going to have those open spaces to traverse. I don't think I even saw a lot of the biomes themselves. Because of how large the world is, and that backtracking ended up being a huge problem for me. I had my one camp near the stones, and I realized when I started to fill up and everything, and I wanted to go back and make stuff, I didn't want to build a whole new giant-ass camp out in the woods, and I wanted to go back and get to all of the resources that I had there so I could utilize them. So the process of going back and forth to your camp with the size of it was a bit of an issue. But considering the size of the team that made it and what they were trying to build and everything like that, I think Valheim is a good framework, and I would personally recommend it if you like survival games. If you do not like survival games, I don't think it's going to change your mind. I don't.
Probably not.
But I'll put it to you this way, Alex. Better than Ark.
To be fair, doesn't take much.
Fair enough.
How many launch options did you have?
How many launch options did I have?
When you press start or play on Steam.
1.
Perfect. It's way better than Ark. 14.
When you actually get into the game, they ask you if you want to do, like, online or offline, or if you want to join servers or start a new one or whatever.
Sure, but that's not when you press play. It comes up with a pop-up of which way would you like to launch the game.
Yeah, no, it just launches the game.
Okay, better than Ark.
There you go. So there you go. So Valheim, has anyone played it? And more importantly, I think the question that I would ask people is, what are your feelings on survival games? Because it's a hit or miss genre for me. Really is. Some I can wrap my head around for a very long period of time, and some I just want to beat my head against a wall.
After you build the wall.
After I build that wall, I beat my head against it, realizing how long it took me to do this for absolutely no reason. I think that since we've built our wall that we can bang our head against, that's a good way to end episode 40 of
Headbang?
Headbanging is a great way to... Yeah, because we're having our midlife crisis. So we're
Perfect. Is that what you're having right now?
Certainly am.
Welcome to your midlife crisis, Nathan.
I mean,
you gonna buy a sports car?
I am gonna buy a sports car. It's going to be amazing.
You could just get into a collectible hobby.
Yeah, I'm gonna. You know what I'm gonna get for my cool car? I'm gonna get Truckosaurus.
Great.
Yeah. Alex, if people want to find out, about my blog about buying Truckosaurus, where could they go? Where could they go?
You want to find out about Nathan's Truckosaurus addiction? You can go to TotalPebbleKnockdown.com.
That might be a new feature. It's gonna suck. But if you want to find content that doesn't suck so much, yes, our shows are over there. Titanium Mine and Creatures are also over there as well. You will also find a Patreon banner if you want to get content delivered to you early, and if you want to get all of the bonus content that we do that's kind of like the off-air behind-the-scenes stuff. You can also follow us on social media. I am at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and the show is at Pebble Knockdown.
And, of course, don't forget that you can find us on every podcast app known to mankind, and if you are on Anchor and signed up there, you can even leave us a voice clip, and we might use it in a future episode. Citation needed. Yeah. Yeah.
Or if you're on iTunes, because you use iTunes, give us a rate and review, please and thanks. That'd be great. We would love to have a couple reviews in places that will do reviews.
Yeah.
Because nowhere else does them, apparently.
Yeah, surprisingly few outlets actually do ratings and reviews, but they do help you get visibility, so if you're using one of those...
Spotify now allegedly does ratings and reviews, but I have no idea
how to access them.
How to find them.
Luckily on iTunes, it's a little bit easier, and I think it's actually Apple Podcasts that they call it now, because they want it to be... They wanted it to be... Yeah, I don't know why. Did the iTunes brand just not ring? It didn't have enough cultural penetration that everybody used it? I don't know. Apple... what are you doing, man? Apple Podcasts, apparently, and Apple Music. Why couldn't you... I still don't understand that. iTunes was such a... Everybody knew what iTunes was.
Did they? Do they? Do you know what iTunes is?
They still say it. So
do you know what uTunes is?
uTunes is what comes after... it's like Wii U after the original Wii.
Oh.
So not good.
Fair enough.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Total Pebble Knockdown, and we will see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye forever.
Well, not forever. I mean, we'll have an episode 41, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Okay.